My name's Aaron. I'm 29 years old, and up until a few weeks ago, I thought my life was going to continue the way it always had, quiet, unnoticed, and tethered to people who only saw me as an obligation. That all changed at the reading of my grandfather's will. But to understand why that day hit like a wrecking ball, I need to take you back a bit, to the parts of the story people like my aunt conveniently forget. Growing up, I was the extra. Not quite unwanted, but not exactly welcomed either. My parents passed away in a car accident when I was 9. After that, I bounced around between relatives, never really landing anywhere long enough to feel like I belonged. Eventually, Grandpa Martin took me in, not because anyone asked him to, but because, in his words, no one throws away family. He was the only one who ever said that to me and actually meant it. While my Aunt Lisa and her 2 picture-perfect daughters went on ski trips and posted matching holiday photos, I spent weekends stacking firewood with Grandpa or helping him repair the squeaky kitchen cabinets he refused to replace. We didn't talk much at first, but he had this quiet way of teaching you things without needing a lecture. Lisa never liked me being there. She never said it outright, but the way she looked at me told the whole story, like I was tracking mud through the family name. She'd drop passive comments every chance she got. Don't forget, Aaron's just visiting, even though I lived there. And every Christmas, when gifts were passed around, mine always came with a stiff smile and a receipt. Just in case you want to return it, she'd say sweetly, like that made it better. When I turned 18, I moved out. Didn't ask for help, didn't expect any. I got a job at a hardware store, took night classes at the local community college, and called Grandpa every Sunday without fail. Lisa's family never called. Not once. But every few months, she'd come around, asking Grandpa about family assets or reminding him that the girls could really use help with tuition. She'd speak in that syrupy voice, pretending to care, but her eyes were always scanning the room, like she was mentally labeling things to take after he passed. Grandpa never gave her much, at least not directly. He helped with what he called essentials, a busted water heater, a down payment on a used car, but he never let her guilt trip him into more. That's what made her so bitter. I remember once, when I came over to mow the lawn, I overheard Lisa in the kitchen. She thought I wasn't there yet. "He's just using you, Dad. Playing the poor orphan role so you'll feel bad. He's not your responsibility." Grandpa's reply was calm, almost too calm. "Aaron's more of a family to me than anyone else under this roof." I stood outside with the mower running long after he said it, just staring at the grass. When Grandpa got sick, it wasn't dramatic. No hospital beds or sudden collapse, just quiet changes. He got tired faster, started forgetting things. I offered to move back in, but he waved me off. "Let an old man enjoy his stubbornness a little longer," he said. So I visited every other day instead, made sure his meds were filled, food was stocked. Lisa showed up exactly twice in the 6 months before he passed. Once to complain about the plumbing in her second home, and once to ask if he'd finalized his will. The funeral was small. Grandpa didn't want a big production. Lisa made sure to wear black designer sunglasses and cry just loud enough for people to notice. She clung to her daughters like she was the grieving heart of the family, while I stood a few feet away, holding the handkerchief Grandpa left me years ago, folded neatly in my pocket like always. A week later, we all gathered in the lawyer's office. Lisa arrived 10 minutes late, dragging her daughters in like they were attending a fashion show. She gave me a once-over and smirked. "Didn't think you'd be needed here, Aaron," she said. "This is just paperwork." The lawyer, Mr. Hensley, was an older man with glasses that slid down his nose every few seconds. He greeted everyone politely, sat down, and opened the folder with Grandpa's name on it. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, Martin Keller left very specific instructions for the distribution of his estate." Lisa leaned back with a smug look. "Of course he did," she muttered. "He always planned to take care of his real family." Mr. Hensley didn't flinch. He cleared his throat. "To begin with, Mr. Keller requested I read a brief personal letter aloud before proceeding." He pulled out a handwritten note and read, "To those gathered, if you're hearing this, it means I've gone to meet your grandmother. Tell her I kept the old truck running. Lisa, you always wanted more from me than I could give. I hope this gives you peace. And Aaron, thank you for being my grandson in every way that counts." Lisa rolled her eyes. "Can we skip the sentiment?" The lawyer gave her a look so dry it could have turned her to dust. "As for the estate," he continued, Mr. Keller has left the entirety of his assets, property, savings, and all personal belongings to Aaron Keller. The room fell so quiet I could hear the clock tick. Lisa blinked. I'm sorry, what? Mr. Hensley repeated it. Everything has been left to Aaron. Lisa barked out a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. That has to be a mistake. Dad would never leave everything to him. He barely belonged in this family. He was not just included, Mr. Hensley said. He was named sole heir. Her daughters looked just as shocked, though they masked it behind bored expressions. Lisa stood up, pointing at me with a trembling hand. This is ridiculous. He manipulated him. He was always Grandpa's charity case, and now he scammed his way into everything. This won't stand. I'll contest it. You'll see. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, stunned. Not because I inherited everything, but because for the first time, I felt seen. Chosen. I remembered every time Grandpa looked at me like I mattered, like I wasn't just a stray he took in. And now the world knew it too. Lisa kept ranting, pacing the small office like a caged animal. Her voice got shriller, her sentences more unhinged. She accused me of brainwashing an old man, of turning Grandpa against his real family, of stealing her birthright. Mr. Hensley calmly reminded her that the will had been notarized and witnessed under full legal scrutiny, twice. She looked at him like he'd just betrayed her too. I sat there, still numb, while Lisa's perfect little world cracked in real time. But the moment that truly ended the silence wasn't anything the lawyer said. It was what I did next. And that is where everything changed. I didn't stand up. I didn't raise my voice. I just slowly reached into my pocket and pulled out a small envelope. The same one Grandpa had handed me months before he passed, back when he still had that twinkle in his eye. Open this when you really need to shut someone up, he'd said with a wink. Lisa was mid-rant, something about calling her attorney and how I'd regret ever stepping foot in the house, when I slid the envelope across the table to Mr. Hensley. He opened it without question, read it silently, and then handed it back to me. His face didn't change, but he leaned forward and said, "There's one final instruction," Mr. Keller added privately. "Aaron, you're free to share it or not, but it might provide clarity." Lisa scoffed. "Oh, please. Another fake note from the orphan prince? How convenient." I unfolded the paper slowly, not for dramatic effect, but because my hands were actually shaking. Then I read it aloud. "Lisa, if Aaron is reading this, it means you've made a scene. Again. I expected it. You always did love the spotlight more than the substance. You spent decades calling him a burden, a charity case. But here's the truth, he never asked for anything. You did. Over and over. Aaron never begged. He just showed up. He earned my respect in every way that counts. You once told me blood is thicker than water. But that phrase has a second part you never learned. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. I choose Aaron. If you don't like that, feel free to call a lawyer. But they'll find what you always refuse to see. You were never the victim. You were just loud. Good luck with the second mortgage. You should have read the fine print on that loan," I co-signed. There was a long pause. Then, for the first time in my life, I saw my aunt's face turn pale. She stammered, what mortgage?" Mr. Hensley, with all the delicacy of a man describing weather, added, "Mr. Keller had me prepare that paperwork 2 years ago. The house was refinanced. He's listed as a 49% owner. Upon his passing, Aaron becomes that beneficiary." "What does that mean?" one of her daughters asked, clearly unnerved. I finally spoke. My voice was calm. "It means I now own nearly half of your house. And given the outstanding balance on the loan, you might want to start packing before the bank does it for you." Lisa looked like someone had just hit her with a truck. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Her voice cracked as she asked, you wouldn't do that to family." I looked at her. Really looked. And something inside me, something that had once wanted so badly to be accepted, just let go. "You made it clear for 20 years that I wasn't family. I believed you. So now, I'm treating this exactly like a business transaction. Nothing personal." Her daughter spoke up, "But we're your cousins." "You've never even called me that," I said flatly. "Not once." Mr. Hensley, doing his best not to look satisfied, began gathering papers. "That concludes the reading. Aaron, if you'd like, we can finalize the transfer of all accounts and assets later this week." Lisa slumped back into the chair like someone had let the air out of her. Her perfectly done hair, her expensive bag, her rehearsed grief, they all looked cheap now. I left the office quietly, but I wasn't the same person who walked in. Something in me had settled. Not out of vengeance, though I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel satisfying, but out of finally feeling like the scales had balanced. Over the next few days, the calls started. First from Lisa, then her husband, then her lawyer, who tried to sound polite while suggesting alternative interpretations of Grandpa's intent. I didn't answer. Instead, I started visiting Grandpa's house again, my house now. I sat in his favorite chair, dusted off the old photo albums, listened to the creaks in the floorboards that once annoyed me. And as I walked the backyard he spent decades tending, I made a decision. I wasn't going to sell the house. Not yet. But I was going to do something with the inheritance, something Lisa would never have imagined in a million years. Because while she spent her life chasing appearances and resenting me for existing, I had quietly taken everything Grandpa ever taught me and turned it into something far more powerful than revenge. And when they found out what I really did with the money, that's when the second storm hit. I didn't tell anyone right away. Not Mr. Hensley, not my coworkers at the hardware store, and definitely not Lisa. I spent the first week in a daze, wandering around the house like I was afraid to sit in any one place for too long. Everything still smelled like Grandpa. His flannel jacket still hung by the door. His slippers were still tucked under the recliner. Every drawer I opened felt like flipping through memories. Old receipts folded into books, spare keys labeled in shaky handwriting, even a list of groceries that stopped halfway through. But grief wasn't the only thing I felt. There was something else rising under the surface. Something quiet but steady. Determination. Grandpa didn't just leave me his home or his savings. He left me a message. Do something with this. Not just survive. Not just be grateful. Do something. I remembered every late-night conversation we had when I was in college. Every what-if brainstorm we tossed around over greasy pizza. He always encouraged my ideas, even the ridiculous ones. Especially the ridiculous ones. I once told him I wanted to open a nonprofit repair shop. One where people could bring in broken furniture or electronics, and, if they couldn't pay, they'd just help someone else in need. He'd laughed, then handed me a screwdriver and said, "Start practicing." Now I had the funds to make it real. But I didn't start with the nonprofit. Not yet. First, I drove 3 hours to visit someone I hadn't seen in nearly a decade, Grandpa's oldest friend, a retired carpenter named Walter. He lived alone in a rundown cottage that looked like it could blow over in a strong breeze. When I showed up at his door, he blinked at me like I'd stepped out of a dream. "Look at you," he said, his voice like sandpaper. "You're taller than Martin ever was." We talked for hours. I told him everything about the will, the inheritance, Lisa's meltdown, and the house. He just listened, nodding occasionally, sipping tea out of a chipped mug. Then I said it. I want to build something. Not for them. Not to prove anything. For him. For me. He leaned back in his chair and smiled. Then let's build. For the next 2 weeks, I practically lived in Grandpa's garage. I turned it into a makeshift planning space. Blueprints taped to the walls, sticky notes everywhere, sawdust in my hair. I called in favors, reached out to some old professors, even contacted the community center to see if they'd ever considered a donation-supported repair co-op. The response was better than I expected. People remembered Grandpa. They remembered the man who showed up to fix a widow's porch for free or spent a weekend building birdhouses for the elementary school. I used a portion of the inheritance to buy a vacant lot near the town square. Small, manageable, but perfect. I kept it quiet. Everything went through my name. No big announcements. No press. Just careful progress, one step at a time. And then, just as things were moving smoothly, Lisa found out. I don't know how she heard. I suspect Mr. Hensley mentioned something in passing to someone who couldn't keep their mouth shut. But within days, I got the first call. I didn't recognize the number, so I picked up. All I heard was her voice, clipped and cold. "So this is why you wanted the money. To buy some plot of dirt in the middle of town." I stayed silent. "You think that's noble? Wasting our father's savings on a shack no one will use? That money was supposed to go to the family. You could have helped with my daughter's tuition. Or the house. Or, God forbid me." I finally said, "I am helping the family. Just not yours." She hung up. That night, someone slashed my car tires. No note, no witnesses. Just 4 clean cuts and a neighbor who said he saw a dark SUV speeding off around midnight. Lisa's husband drove a black Escalade. I didn't report it. I just got them replaced and parked the car in Grandpa's garage from then on. But that was just the start. Next came the emails. Anonymous. Cruel. Phrases like, "You'll fail just like your parents did," and "You'll run out of money before you make a dent." They didn't scare me. They just proved I was getting under someone's skin. Then Lisa showed up in person. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was at the build site, reviewing the foundation with a contractor, when I saw her step out of her car in high heels, looking completely out of place in the dust and noise. She walked straight up to me like she owned the place. "You need to stop this. It's embarrassing." "For you?" I asked. "For the family." "Funny. You never called me that before." She took a deep breath, clearly trying to keep her voice from cracking. "Do you know what people are saying? That you manipulated Dad. That you waited until he was sick and confused. That you tricked him." I looked her in the eye and said, "You're confusing me with yourself." That hit something. Her face twisted. "You think this makes you better than us? Because you got the money and now you're playing Mr. Philanthropist?" "I'm not playing anything," I said. "But if it bothers you this much, maybe you should ask yourself why." She stared at me for a long time, then said something that stuck with me. "He was supposed to see me. He was supposed to love me like that." And for a second, just a second, I saw the child underneath all her bitterness. But then she blinked, straightened her spine, and added, "You'll regret this. When it all falls apart, don't come crawling back." She turned and walked off. Her heels sank into the dirt with every step. I didn't watch her go. I just turned back to the contractor and asked, "So how soon can we start framing?" But I knew this wasn't over, because I'd touched something deeper than money. I'd inherited more than Grandpa's assets. I'd inherited his legacy and the storm that came with it. And just when I thought things had started to settle, I got the letter. The letter came in a cream envelope with my full name handwritten on the front. No return address. No postage stamp. Just left in my mailbox like a ghost had walked it over. My first thought was Lisa. Another guilt trip? A last-ditch threat? But when I opened it, the handwriting stopped me cold. It was Grandpa's. The ink was faded, but the letters were unmistakable. His slow, careful script that curved too far to the right. I sat down right there on the porch steps and read it under the fading light. "Aaron, if you're reading this, it means everything played out like I thought it might. Lisa probably threw a fit. Maybe even tried to contest the will. She never could stand not being the center of the story. But this isn't about her. It's about you. I know I never said this out loud as much as I should have, but I want you to know, I'm proud of you. I saw every sacrifice you made, every time you bit your tongue, every night you sat beside me while I pretended not to forget the names of people I once loved. You never made me feel weak. You just made me feel seen. And I know how hard it is to carry that weight, that legacy. People will look at you and say you got lucky, that you inherited comfort. But they won't see the part that matters, that you earned every ounce of it by showing up when no one else did. Do something good with it. But don't lose yourself in the process. And if Lisa ever shows up asking for help, well, I know you'll do what I couldn't. Love, Gramps." I sat there for a long time after reading that. Not crying, not angry, just still. Like something had finally landed in place after years of hovering above me. It's strange how grief lingers. Even when you think you're past it, it taps you on the shoulder at the most unexpected times. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my wallet. It's still there today. The very next morning, I called a meeting with the board I'd formed for the nonprofit. We had been calling it a co-op up until then, but I decided to give it a proper name, the Martin House. We filed the papers the same day. Construction moved quickly. The town caught wind of what we were doing after a reporter covered the youth center donation and traced it back to me. Suddenly, I was getting calls, some grateful, some nosy, a few aggressive. But the calls I remember most were from people like Walter, from teachers, single moms, and even a few guys who used to bully me back in high school. They came with hammers, tools, and paint buckets. They helped us build. Lisa, predictably, didn't take the public goodwill well. She made one final push a few weeks later, right after I hosted an open house preview of the nearly completed Martin House. She filed a formal contest of the will, claiming I'd manipulated Grandpa during his last months. Said I took advantage of his weakened mental state. She even hired a lawyer from 2 towns over, some sharp-talking type who smelled blood in the water. But what Lisa didn't know was that Grandpa had already planned for that, too. Mr. Hensley filed a countersuit within 24 hours, armed with psychiatric evaluations from 2 different doctors Grandpa had quietly visited 6 months before his death. One of the reports even included a statement Grandpa had specifically requested, "I am of sound mind and have chosen Aaron Keller as my sole heir not out of obligation, but respect and love." He is my family in every sense of the word. The judge dismissed Lisa's case within minutes. She was ordered to pay all court costs. By the time that verdict came down, she had already put her house on the market. I didn't have to evict her after all. Her pride did the job for me. She moved to a smaller place an hour away, and word got around that she was now taking time to reflect. Sure, I didn't gloat. I didn't send her a message. But when the real estate papers hit my desk, I did buy the house. Quietly. I gave it to the community as a halfway home for young adults aging out of foster care. Fitted it with donated furniture, stocked the pantry, and left a note in the hallway. This house was once full of silence. May it now be full of second chances. The Martin house officially opened 3 months later. We didn't cut a ribbon. We hosted a cookout. Burgers, music, kids running around, and laughter so loud it spilled into the street. Walter gave a small speech. He built the entrance bench himself, carving Grandpa's initials into the side. The youth center director hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. And then, right as the sun dipped behind the hills, I stepped into the backyard where Grandpa used to garden. There was a small plaque we'd mounted under his favorite apple tree, in memory of Martin Keller, who believed in showing up. I didn't cry. Not then. But later that night, back home in the quiet, I stood in the kitchen Grandpa had cooked in for decades and ran my hand over the counter where we used to prep sandwiches. I thought about the first night I moved in after my parents passed, how scared I was, how unwanted I felt, how Lisa had looked at me like a stain she couldn't scrub out. And now? Now the town bore my last name. The same one Grandpa gave me not through blood, but through belief. I wish I could say Lisa apologized, that she sent a letter or made a tearful call, but she didn't. The last I heard, her youngest daughter dropped out of college and moved across the country. Her eldest had gone no contact after a fight over money. Funny how that works. As for me, I'm still living in Grandpa's house, still mowing the lawn, still sitting on that porch swing with a coffee and watching the town go by. But now people wave. They stop. They smile. Because now I belong. And not because I inherited something, but because I built something. And I finally understood what Grandpa meant when he said, "No one throws away family." Because sometimes the best way to honor the truth is to throw away the ones who already did.